first breath, a first step, a first word. Becoming strong, becoming whole, becoming one, becoming human. Human in the ambitious pursuits of the things in my heart, hoping that my eyes won't see them depart. Human in the emotional parts hidden, because sometimes it feels that laughing too loud is forbidden. Human in the identities deeply rooted within, wondering if the story of who I am is only to begin. But assured of the idea that my story is finite, knowing that even the sun's light won't always burn bright. Yet some things in the ordinary day feel eternal. The soft-spoken touch of a mum, the words scribbled in my journal. The smile of a stranger, the rainbow stretched over the sky that I see. Am I just hopeful? Or am I fearful of the small things that define me? Thirsting to know, thirsting to be rational in the unexplainable. Am I seeking something sustainable or even attainable? A last breath, a last step, a last word. Human, 2023, who are we?
Good evening, and welcome to our third evening event of Human. Whoever you are, however you are, you're so welcome. My name is Chris. I'm a third year at St. John's, and I study classics.
I'm Sarah. I'm also a third year at John's, and I do theology. So this week, the Christian Union have been putting on a series of events all about what it means to be human. We've been having various talks, interviews, and performances asking, who are we? And what answers did the historical person of Jesus give in response to that question?
But just before we kick off, some practicalities to go through. If you need the toilet at any point this evening, we have some at the back of the church through that door, some up the stairs, or an accessible toilet down the stairs, like on the ground floor. If the fire alarm goes off, we're not expecting a drill, so please evacuate the building through the doors at the back. We have a dedicated quiet space for this evening. If at any point you do need some time out or time to reflect, then just through the door at the front of the church and up the stairs, you're so welcome to go there, or just find some space at the back of the church. And finally, if you have any other questions, do just speak to someone in one of the green human jumpers, and they'll be happy to answer your questions.
So today we're looking at the theme of emotional. And if you've come to our lunchtime talks earlier and evening talks, thanks for coming back. You're so welcome. So tonight we're going to be exploring what it means to hold on when it still hurts. We'll be having talk, student testimonies, and a performance. So we really hope you enjoy.
But first, to kick off, we have a game. Our game for tonight is... We usually have a fun link between the theme and the game, but we don't tonight. It's Would You Rather.
If they're making emotional choices, you know.
Okay, all right. But yes, we're going to be using Pigeonhole, so please scan the QR code on your phones or go to pigeonhole.at and type in the passcode HUMAN. You should find yourself on the page where you can start filling in a poll as the questions come up. So just 10 seconds or so to scan that up.
Hopefully this doesn't cause lots of controversy. They're quite lighthearted.
Cool. Hopefully you've managed to find the website there. So could we have our first question, please?
So the first one is Crushbridge or Camfest. Which do you prefer? You can do a little poll and we'll see what the results are. Okay.
So when you're having a scroll, do you rather Camfest or
I think
Crushbridge?
Camfest is winning.
Whoa, 69, 70?
To be fair, it's called 2Cam, 2Fest right now after the demise of Camfest before. Okay, so Camfest has won that one. And our next Would You Rather?
Would you rather accidentally call your supervisor mum or have your mum as your supervisor?
Hopefully the former hasn't actually happened to anyone, because that would be embarrassing. Have your mum as your supervisor? Is that actually winning? I would not expect that.
No harm to my mum.
Yeah.
Wow, no one would take, well,
I did not expect that, I have
only
to say.
40% are taking the one-time blow. Oh, brilliant. Let's have the next question, please. Would you rather Gardies or Van of Life? What's your go-to snack after a big night out?
What's yours, Chris?
I mean,
You
probably
don't
to
go on nights out.
McDonald's.
Fair enough.
Oh, I think Gardies is taking it.
I agree with this decision. Guardies all the way. So the next would you rather is, would you rather fall into the cam or fall off your voy in the middle of King's Parade? Oh, fall in the cam.
Surprising. Lots of keen swimmers here. Next question, please. Would you rather Franco Manca or Pizza Pilgrims?
Oh, Pizza Pilgrims have done very poorly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they are quite new. Have you been, Sarah?
No, I haven't, and I don't intend on going yet.
Very fair, very fair. Okay, next question. Would you rather spend a night trapped in the UL or be subscribed to every single Cambridge Society mailing list for a week? A resounding success for the UL by the looks of it.
The UL's like a prison. I would not want that.
I guess there's like a fun side to it though. You know, imagine all the books you could find.
And the next, would you rather? Mainsbury's or Far Wainsbury's? I have to admit, I've never been to Far Wainsbury's, so I can't make a clear decision on this one.
Cool, just a few more. Next question, please.
Share a kitchen with 20 people or a bathroom with 7 people?
Ooh, divisive.
Oh, this is quite split. Oh. Bathroom with 7 people. Oh, no. Almost completely 50-50.
Wow, most divisive yet. Okay, next question, please. Would you rather never go to a formal again or wear a gown to all of your lectures?
I do have a lecturer who still wears his gown to all the lectures.
Really?
Yeah.
And you guys don't copy him? Well, I think the gown wins. Yeah, formals are great. Cool, I think that was the end of our quiz for today. So thank you all for taking part in that with us.
So we're now going to be introducing our speaker for tonight. Matt, if you'd like to join us on stage.
Hey everyone, good to see you.
Thanks so much for being with us this week. Who are you and what are you doing here?
So my name's Matt. Good to see you all. I live just on the edge of Cambridge, out in a place called Teversham, which is basically 3 o'clock. If you drew Cambridge as a clock, I live at 3 o'clock. And I work for a church that meets just out there. I've been in Cambridge about 5.5 years. I've been living there for about 1.5 years.
Great. So our theme tonight is emotional. Is there a time you've been emotional watching a film maybe? Has it made you cry?
So I don't know whether I really should admit this, but I think Pixar, historical Pixar, from around about, up until about 2013, are the greatest storytellers in the history of humanity. And I fail to watch a Pixar film without tears running down my cheeks. Wall-E, emotional wreck. And I'm sure everybody has been totally wrecked by the first few minutes of Up, right? Is there any film, any opening to any film which is more emotional than that? I don't think so. Watch those with my kids, and I'm in pieces.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt. So yeah, we're now going to have a slight change in gear as Matt starts to talk to us this evening and starts to tell us about our theme, holding on when it hurts. And if this does flag up anything for you at any point in this evening, just to reiterate, we do have the quiet room at the front or some space at the back. Do feel free to go whenever you like. And of course, there's no pressure to stay for the whole event, but we'd love it if you did. Okay, thanks, Matt. Do take it away.
Great, thanks, Chris and Sarah. As Chris says, we're talking, the title for tonight is Holding On When It Hurts, which means that we're talking about some pretty heavy things at points this evening. The world is a place where, if we are facing up to reality, there is a lot of mess, which means we're going to be thinking about some difficult things tonight, hearing some stories of people who've been through difficult things, and I'm very aware that for some people that may be difficult. If you need to check out or go out at any stage, then please do. Don't feel, don't worry about me or anyone else here at all. Please do that. To be human, that's the really big question that we're thinking about this week. What does it mean to be human? And in many ways, to be human, perhaps one of the defining questions of being human is the question why. I have 6 children. The oldest is nearly 14, the youngest is 7. I did say 6, yes, I heard that over here somewhere. I did say 6. And every single one of them, all the way through, as they've grown up, have all been through that why phase. Every single one, kind of where the question they ask is constantly why. Why this, why that, why this? I can remember one of my sons coming from school, and he'd obviously been playing on him all day, this question. And he came out of school and he said, Dad, I really want to know, why is the sky blue, why is grass green, and why is our car black? I have no idea exactly how he'd link those 3 things together, but it was quite an interesting conversation that we then had about colour and vision perception and all sorts of different things with my 5-year-old son on the way home. But in many ways, that question, why, it doesn't go away as we grow older, as we age. But perhaps it just grows a little more intense. Why is the world the way it is? Why is my experience like this? I used to work as a doctor. I studied medicine up in Newcastle. I worked as a doctor for 7 years. And for some of that time, I worked looking after people at the end of their life in care of the elderly medicine and in palliative care. Every doctor will tell you that there are patients that they come across who will never leave their minds. They will always remember them. And one of those patients for me was a young woman that I looked after. And I looked after her in my time working in a hospice. She was in her early 30s. She had a 6-month-old baby and a 5-year-old son. And she had end-stage breast cancer. And as the junior doctor in the team, me and the team were desperately trying to get on top of her pain that she was experiencing. And to be honest, we were struggling, really struggling. She was in a lot of pain, and she was dying. And over the few weeks that she was with us in the hospice, I spent quite a lot of time with her husband. Her husband was also in his early 30s. And we had a lot of very long, very tear-drenched conversations. And almost every time he would cycle round to that question, why? Why has this happened? She doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink, she's a great wife, she's a great mum. Why did she have to get cancer? And I remember one particular occasion when he stopped me and he pulled me up short because in the middle of a conversation he just stopped and he just outright asked, looked me in the eye and said, "Do you believe in God, Matt?" And I said, "Well, actually, yes, I'm a Christian. I do believe in God." And he said, "Yeah, so did I, or at least I thought I did. But now I don't really think so." I mean, why would he let this happen? And that really is the issue, isn't it? George Bernard Shaw put it slightly more philosophically. How are atheists produced? In probably 9 times out of 10, what happens is something like this. A beloved wife or husband or child or sweetheart is gnawed to death by cancer, struck dumb by apoplexy or strangled by diphtheria, and the looker-on, after praying vainly to God to refrain from such wanton and horrible cruelty, indignantly repudiates his faith in the divine monster and becomes not merely indifferent and skeptical, but fiercely and actively hostile to religion. As you look at the world, as you watch others suffer, as you perhaps experience your own suffering in your life, then very often it seems like there are only two conclusions. Either God doesn't care, or he isn't there. And that seems to be where we're led. And I need to say right from the outset that I am in no way well qualified to talk about suffering. Some of the stories we're going to hear this evening, the story of my patient, I have not experienced suffering to that degree. I have had struggles with my mental health, which I'll tell you a little bit about later. My wife and I have, despite our 6 children, have also lived through a period of subfertility and multiple miscarriage. Those were hard times, but I've not been through the ringer in the same way my patient's husband and my patient and her family were. And I'm very aware that there may well be people in the room who really are going through the ringer in different ways right now. And we need to say that for some of us, that question why is more really of a scream. A scream, why? Why is this happening? And it would be both foolish and untruthful of me to say that there was anything like an easy answer, and that Christianity could provide easy answers, but then I'm not sure anyone would trust it if it did. But I also want to say that there are no easy answers, and actually that goes, I think, more for answers which reject God than answers which hold on to him. So I want to ask a couple of questions tonight, and the first one is this. The first question is, does rejecting God actually solve the problem of suffering? Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's a stupid question. Of course it does. If you reject God, then you don't need to worry about it, and it's just the way things are. No God, no problem. You just get on with it, right? Okay. Then why is it that when we experience or see suffering, our response is not just to say, this hurts, ouch, but also to go one more step and say, this is wrong. This isn't right. This shouldn't be this way. I remember seeing someone I follow on Twitter who had just lived through the sudden death of her wife. And she wrote this: "It feels very discombobulating to be an atheist and yet want to rage and rage and rage at the sheer cosmic injustice of this. Please don't tell me there's a just God. There clearly is not." Which both encapsulates the instinctive response that some of us have, but also highlights the problem. Because if you dispense with an unjust God, then what standard are you measuring justice against? How can you possibly say this isn't fair if you do away with any ultimate standard of fairness? Where does the should come from? What are we comparing the world with if this is all there is? What are we comparing our suffering to? In the end, it's all we should expect if it's just blind, pitiless indifference. Why should it feel like it should be any other way? So people often raise the problem of suffering and say, look, it's a massive problem for faith in God. And that's fair. It is a problem which we need to wrestle with. And the Bible spends thousands of words wrestling with the problem of suffering for faith in God. But even in calling it a problem, if we're trying to use it to dispense with God, we give too much away. Because it can only be a problem if we assume a standard or imagine a world where everything is right. And as I ask, where does that standard come from? What is it that we are looking for when we say suffering isn't right? Why do we imagine the world should be any different? Now, as I say, some of you might be thinking, well, that's a stupid question, or you might be thinking, that's an insensitive question. But it is a question. And what we want to do, the Christian Union and what I want to do all week this week, is to give opportunity to actually genuinely discuss some of these big questions of what it means to be human. And so what we're going to do simply is pause right now. I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so to think a little bit about some of the questions that I've raised. A couple of questions will come up on the screen. Don't feel that you have to engage in this discussion, but if you want to chat to maybe just the person next to you, or maybe in threes or something like that about these questions, then this is a great opportunity to do that, to open up this whole area. Equally, if you just want to talk about what you got up to today and wait for me to come up and talk again, then that's absolutely fine. Here are the questions. The first one is, how do you think our reaction to suffering reveals a sense of what the world should be like? And how would you account, whatever it is you believe, how would you account for where that should comes from? Have a think about those, chat about those where you are. I'm going to break into your conversations just there. There is going to be more opportunity to discuss, and this is what this entire week is about. So please don't feel like you've just lost and that's it. There is more opportunity coming. One of the other things that we're very keen to do is to give people opportunity to actually hear how all of this sort of thing that we're talking about, it can be brought down to ground level. It's all very well talking about hard things and suffering in slightly philosophical ways, and it's important that we think about it like that, but it's also important to remember that this is real. And as a result, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from a couple of people tonight. And first, I'm going to introduce Michael. Michael's a second year studying history, is at Pembroke, and I'm going to hand over to him. I think I even remembered your stats, so that's good.
Well done. Hello. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for inviting me to come and speak. That was brave. And for all the work they've done at putting on what has so far been a fantastic week. I've got to admit, I am pretty daunted standing here tonight, tasked with giving my testimony. Søren Kierkegaard said that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. And I think that captures some of the difficulties in saying something authentic about the process of coming to faith. Any story we tell inevitably loses some of the chaotic quality of the immediacy of living. What comforts me in this challenge is that when we tell stories about ourselves, we are creating something coherent from chaos. And by doing that, we are emulating the creative act through which God created the universe, replacing something dark and formless with a world of light. So just as God created the heavens and the earth, I believe he created you and I, and that we reflect the glory of a beautiful creator. But I didn't start life with this belief. It took me a long time to get there. I was born into a pretty non-religious household. My mum was brought up a believer, but by the time of my birth, she'd more or less stopped being one. And my dad was definitely not one and was very keen to let us know that. If I knew anything about my dad growing up, it was that he wanted to kill the Queen, so job done. And he didn't believe in God. And I remember once, I was about 6 or 7, being very puzzled about this. I was sort of religious in the way that a lot of children are sort of vaguely religious. You know, you hear the nice songs in primary school and it's all good. And so I remember saying to my dad, completely mystified, Dad, if God doesn't exist, what happens to people when they die? And I thought this was an iron-tight argument. And I remember my dad, this sort of intense guy, looking me dead in the eyes. When I was about 7 years old. He looks me dead in the eyes and just goes, eternal, never-ending nothingness, and then leaves the room. So interesting guy. Not a religious household, that's my point. How I came to share that sort of dogged militant atheism, I'm not sure, but by the time I was 10, I was pretty certain there was no God. My world was defined by an emptiness I perceived at its center, a bleak oblivion lurking beneath our daily routines and engulfing us in the night when distractions ceased to provide escape. It was the absence of God which, as an early teenager, powerfully struck me. My nihilistic worldview was the product of being really pretty unhappy. As a child, I remember walking around the schoolyard of my primary school, and imagining that the world was this blank canvas. It was full of emptiness, but also opportunity. And I was a block of black paint, this sort of ugly stain on the canvas that blocks the place of beauty. And I think, looking back on it now, that I was suicidal before I knew what suicide was. I do all sorts of strange things in relation to that. But even as I longed for death, I'm not sure I really believed with my whole heart in nothingness, because nothingness doesn't correspond with anything in the human experience, so it can't really be conceptualized by the human mind. So I was yearning for nothingness, but I had this terrible fear that there might be some sort of life after death. I think for this reason, I began to pray, but they weren't Christian prayers. I'd ask God during the night to allow me to die in my sleep. And every time I woke up the next morning, I'd curse God. I saw this as confirmation, either that God didn't exist, or that God did exist and he had heard my prayers, but he obviously didn't care about me, or he'd have let me die. Now I think I was just asking the wrong question. But and so yeah, it was an unhappy childhood, and I think this unhappiness led to me making other people unhappy, as it often does. I remember spending a lot of time at school, being very annoying in all sorts of ways, and telling people that they should either kill themselves instantly, or at the very least commit to not reproducing. And then we could end this ghastly human experiment and embrace death as the highest possible good, and we'd also not have to go to maths, so it'd be great. Needless to say, I wasn't invited to that many parties, but that was my whole deal, right? Death, it was great. All that said, how did I actually become a Christian? Big question. That's why we're here. I know one commentator who compared finding God to falling in love. And you can give all sorts of reasons for why you love somebody you love. You can say she's beautiful, or he's funny, or they go to a central college with a nice bedroom. Wealthy parents, whatever you like. So you can give all sorts of reasons for why you love the people you love. But love doesn't happen in part, it happens in full. You don't really fall in love with an attribute, you fall in love with a person. And I think that's similar to me with coming to faith. So it's difficult to break down, but I know that beauty played a big role. When I was about 15, I started sneaking off to visit churches in my spare time. A pastime which was sparked for me when I was in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And became captivated on a brief visit to the cathedral there. It was sort of a simple sense of peace, which, when your life is dominated by mental illness, when you don't know who you are, when you feel sort of split between competing emotions, is a powerful thing. And the awesome majesty of the architecture that really captured me. It was sort of a happy marriage, I think, between the grandeur of eternity, the idea of this God that is so outside of my personal struggles that he knew our distant ancestors and will know our distant descendants, that awesome majesty of God and beauty, but also the quiet solace, which is deeply personal. And so I spent an increasing amount of time in the next few years making these discreet church visits, bunking off school, or enigmatically telling my friends in free periods that I had stuff to do, and then going to church. But it took a long time for me to admit my faith to myself, longer still to confess it to God, and even longer to tell other people about it. I told myself that it was an interest based only on history and aesthetics, but there was much more to it. I think two things that describe that experience well is one poem by Philip Larkin, which describes the draw of churches as saying, "A serious house on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robed as destinies. And that much never can be obsolete, since someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground which he once heard was proper to grow wise in, if only that so many dead lie around." T.S. Eliot has a similar sentiment. "And what the dead had no speech for when living, they can tell you being dead. The communication of the dead is tongued with fire beyond the language of the living. Here, the intersection of the timeless moment. is England and nowhere, never and always. The beauty that I felt in these ancient churches was the beauty of communing with the dead, with generations who existed centuries before our time, who once worshipped in a space that was mine. This sense of timelessness set my mind ablaze with thoughts of eternity. And so I was deeply preoccupied with death and longing for death and wanting to be dead. And I think I discovered that that wasn't always an anti-religious sentiment. That was, in a sense, a deeply religious feeling, because I was being called towards eternity. And when I thought about the absence of God, that made the moments where I felt God's presence even more transcendent and blessed. The church, for all its failings, seems to be a vehicle of beauty across the history of human ugliness, a preserve of inner sanctity that retained a core of goodness across 2 millennia. Eventually, I realized that the Christian church is beautiful because Jesus Christ is beautiful. The life of the God-man, who so loved the world that he died for it so that we may live, who loved unto death with a love courageous enough that it went to the grave, but powerful enough that it rose from it, seems to me to be like an elemental core of the universe. The Gospel of John tells us that Jesus of Nazareth, who lived this beautiful life, was present at the creation of the universe, and that nothing that has been made was made without him. If you accept this as true, the world becomes enchanted again. I find myself daily struck now by the beauty of mundanity and the preciousness of every little thing. Nature sends my mind just sort of whirling around the cosmos. And so a world which had previously been defined for me through absence, an absence sparked by the absence of happiness, became so full and so rich with enchantment. And that, I think, is a choice. Having said all this, it's important to me that I don't seem to suggest that my mental health changed as I slowly felt called towards Christianity. By the time I came to Cambridge, I'd started identifying as a Christian, and I'd made some wonderful Christian friends. You know who you are, some of you. And they improved my faith beyond measure, but I think I was still lost in a dreadful storm of self-hatred. I remember particularly feeling like I was drowning in how deeply I felt about everything, while being hopelessly unable to articulate those feelings to the people around me. All of this culminated in me ending up in a hospital and feeling myself, as you might imagine, totally abandoned by God. But it was in this dreadful moment that I saw God work extraordinarily powerfully. About a week after I arrived in the hospital ward, a man called Andrew was put in the room next to mine. And one day I overheard him speaking to one of the nurses and describing his recent loss of faith. They were talking about Gethsemane, the garden where Jesus wept before being betrayed by his friends and taken to his death. I remember feeling impelled to go and talk to Andrew, mostly because I was struck by the unlikelihood that another Christian would be put in the room next to mine, that I would overhear his conversation about the suffering of Jesus. So I did, and he told me that he'd been a worship leader at his church before his breakdown, but now he couldn't even bring himself to pick up his guitar. He hadn't lost his intellectual confidence in the arguments of Christianity, but he was captured, as I had been as a teenager and was in that moment, by the terrible, all-consuming weight of the absence of God and the sense of desolation that comes from feeling abandoned. A few days later, in the common room of the hospital where patients were encouraged to sit and talk and read, and there was a PlayStation, it was pretty cool, one of the nurses brought in his guitar and was playing a few songs for us. Great. I didn't sing. I very rarely socialized in the common room. I don't sing. But that night, I felt drawn to go. And so I found myself sitting there listening to the nurse play his guitar, after which a few patients volunteered to sing something. One of the others, who must have known Andrew could sing, maybe they knew he'd been a worship leader, encouraged him to play something, and he replied that he only knew Christian songs. Oh, never mind, we'll listen to them if we have to. So he did. And Andrew, this man who had told me just a few days earlier that he couldn't bring himself to sing worship songs, sang. And he sang the song, "Be Still for the Presence of the Lord," which some of you might know. I'm not going to sing it, but I will quote some of the lyrics. Be still, for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Come bow before him now in reverence and fear. In him no sin is found. We stand on holy ground. Be still, for the power of the Lord is moving in this place. He comes to cleanse and heal, to minister his grace. No work too hard for him. In faith, receive from him. Be still, for the power of the Lord is moving in this place. I remember after Andrew finished singing, another of the patients, who was called Danny. And Danny was a lovely man. I remember a few days before he'd made cakes for us all. That was nice. But he'd spent 18 years of his life before coming to the hospital in prison. And I think it was clear to all of us that he should have been in the hospital 18 years earlier. This man who had spent 18 years of his life in prison, he came up and he hugged Andrew, and he was in tears, and he cried for a long time. And he said, I'm not a Christian, but I just feel tremendously moved in this moment, not just by the beauty of the song and what it meant for Andrew to be able to sing it, but by the palpable presence that God was in that space, in that hospital, amongst those people, the palpable presence of God. The writer of that song had said that he'd been inspired in writing it by Genesis 28:16. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. I think that summarizes well enough the entire story about myself I've told you tonight, that this powerful, enduring, and yes, life-changing revelation of God's love came to me in a place of suffering and pain, surrounded by people in terrible situations, enduring awful loss and heartbreak, is no coincidence whatsoever. It is a testament to the character of the Christian God as we know him in Jesus Christ, the God who loved unto death, the God who weeps. I've spent a lot of my life wishing I was dead, but like Jacob, I was already, in a sense, dead, because I was asleep to beauty and to love. And although I still feel scared and lost and hurt, I can say now that surely the Lord is in this place. I did not know it, but I know it now. And it is the knowledge of this enormous consolation that makes life worth living. Not because I've been delivered out of darkness, but because I know to fix my eyes upon the light. I don't know if any of that will resonate with any of you, but I hope that it will help you understand in some way the Christian response, or at least this Christian's response, to how believers hold on when it hurts. Now I'll give the mic back to Matt. Thanks.
Thank you for a very, very brave telling of a very brave story, Michael. We've just heard Michael's experience of being in very, very dark places and finding the presence of God there. And it might well be that you have heard Michael's story and you're thinking, I'm so glad that that's your experience. But is it really an experience I could hope for? Is it really an experience which makes sense of that problem that we started thinking about at the beginning? And you may even be thinking back to some of the things I started saying, kind of, where does that should come from? And it could well be that we're now sitting here going, okay, right, so if the Christian response to suffering begins with, we can't say that God is not there and still say that suffering is a problem, haven't I just made the thing a whole lot worse? Because surely if life can be as bad as that, and God is powerful and good, and we can't say God is not there, then the only other option we have is to say sometimes he doesn't care. And that would seem abhorrent. Well, that question, does God care, is very much in the air in the middle of John's account of Jesus' life, which is on the tables just in front of you. I'd love you to pick that up and turn roundabout to the middle of it, to page 30, I think it's 34, which will take you to big number 11, chapter 11. Does God care? The question is in the air here as Jesus visits the grave of a very dear friend of his. It turns out Jesus had some very close friends, not just the people that we know as the 12 disciples, but another 3 are mentioned in John here by the name of Martha and Mary and Lazarus. They're siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, Martha and Mary and Lazarus. And at this point in John's account of Jesus' life, it turns out that Lazarus, Jesus' very dear friend, is sick. Not only that, he is so sick that it looks as though he is going to die. And so Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, naturally get in touch with Jesus. So little number 3, the top of page 35, the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is ill. You don't need to read between the lines. Jesus, he's sick. He may be dying. We need you to know. And I wonder what you think you would do in that situation. A very dear friend of yours who is some distance away is very unwell. You'd go, wouldn't you? Go to be with them. Even if you couldn't do anything, if you couldn't change the situation, your presence is important for them and for you. Have an opportunity to be there. And in the context of John, the story that John is telling, actually this has got even more of an edge to it, because John has spent 10 chapters already describing Jesus doing incredible things. He has healed a paralyzed man. He has made a blind man see. He has fed 5,000 people with a packed lunch and nothing more. And so, this is what, the point is, this is what Mary and Martha believe of Jesus. They believe he is capable of these things. And so it's not just a call to say, the one you love is ill, please come. It's also, from their perspective, a cry for help. Would you be able to do something? And that is what makes Jesus' response not just surprising, but shocking. Little number 5. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was 2 more days. You think, what? Does he care? Why isn't he doing something? If he's capable of doing something, why is he not doing something? And that introduces a really vital idea, because it raises the question of whether it's possible that Jesus could have a good reason for not going, which, when expanded out into its biggest realm, is very similar to the question of whether God could have a good reason or a set of good reasons for allowing difficult and hard things, for allowing suffering, which might even outweigh how bad suffering is. Is that possible? And you might even, as I ask that, think, well, if the first question, whether getting rid of God solves the problem, was insensitive, that one's just offensive. But just stay with me for a moment. During my time as a junior doctor, I worked on a ward that looked after people with end-stage diabetes. It was a diabetes ward. Every single patient on the ward had diabetes. And you might know people with diabetes, and you might think, if you don't know much about it, well, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. It's difficult for them, but if they keep it under control, they seem to be able to live a normal life. What on earth is end-stage diabetes? And the answer is that if you don't keep it under control, diabetes, because of the problem with the sugar levels in your blood, ends up killing the small nerves in your hands and your feet, so you lose sensation. So I was looking after patients who had literally had amputations because they had a stone in their shoe for the last few weeks and hadn't noticed, and it had developed an infection. Ask someone like that whether or not there is a good reason for pain, and they will give you a very clear answer. Pain is there to point to something that needs fixing. That's the point. Pain points to a problem. And so suffering, we kind of look at it and we go, there is something wrong. Every why we ask isn't just a why asking what the purpose is. It's also a why asking what the cause is. What is the problem here? What has gone wrong? And when things get really out of control and an earthquake hits Turkey and Syria and kills thousands of people, then the only conclusion we feel like we can draw is that the cause, well, the blame lies in the lap of some all-powerful being. And we join King Lear in crying, like flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. But the question is there an alternative? Is there an alternative place to look for what the problem might be? Because right from page 1 of the Bible insists that God is not just good, but the source of everything good. And that he made people for relationship with him as the source of everything good. But the thing about a relationship between a creator and a creature is it's not symmetrical. It's more analogous to a kingdom. And the thing about people made for relationship is that those people have significance and their decisions matter. And so the question is, are those people going to serve that king and relate to him as the source of all goodness? Or are they going to rebel against him? And what the Bible describes is an act of rebellion against that king, which leaves us in a situation where instead of one good kingdom with one supremely good king and 8 billion subjects, we have 8 billion individual kingdoms of me and 8 billion individual definitions of right and wrong, which don't fit together. And suffering is the result, whether direct suffering as a result of my actions or someone else's actions, or indirect suffering, which is the result of living in a world in which we have caused fractures in our relationship with creation because of the fractured nature of our relationship with our Creator. And so the question is, where do you look for a solution to a problem like that? And the absolutely astonishing thing we find in John chapter 11 is that Jesus says, look to me. It's there, little number 14. He gives his reason for not going to visit Lazarus and Martha and Mary to begin with. He told his followers, his disciples plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. The point is that the suffering of Mary and Martha, their bereavement, is going to show something about Jesus, is going to point to Jesus, and it's going to show 2 things. The first is his human compassion. He does care. John and Jesus are not going to pretend that suffering doesn't hurt. Have a look at what happens when Jesus arrives. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You can hear the agony, the anguish in her voice. Because from her perspective, it's true. Jesus is the miracle worker. It was a cry for help that called him to come. Look down to little number 32. Mary, her sister, says exactly the same thing. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Is there a hint of accusation in their voice? Perhaps. They believe he is the miracle worker, but they also believe he's their friend. So why has he not done anything? Does he not care? Yes, Jesus cares. As he is brought to the place where Lazarus is laid. This is how John describes it. When Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. And then the Jews said, see how he loved him. Even the crowd around can see Jesus' compassion. It's right there, etched on his face, in the agony that Jesus himself is feeling. How do they know that he feels this compassion? Because he feels it, and they can see it. But yet there's something odd going on here, isn't there? Because, let's face it, Jesus knows in this story what he's about to do. Spoiler alert, a dead man is going to be raised to life by the end of this little story. Why would Jesus be so deeply moved if he knows the problem is about to be solved and that he's about to solve it? Answer, because he feels the problem. This is the wonder of what it means that God became human in the person of Jesus Christ. That as we were thinking about, if you're here on Monday, that Jesus, the Christian claim is that Jesus is God speaking to us in the clearest language we could possibly need. God speaking to us in human. And the wonder of the fact that God did that is that it means that God steps into our mess and sits in the muck as the man Jesus Christ. He identifies with us so that actually his compassion really is compassion. Compassion literally means simply suffering with someone. And in Jesus, God joins us. But it still doesn't solve the problem. That's the issue here, isn't it? That's the painful thing. It doesn't solve the problem. And the crowd actually know it. Some of them say, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? It's all very well that he's deeply moved, but couldn't he have done something about it? Could he yet still do something about it? And that's the second thing. If the first thing is Jesus' human compassion that this bereavement story shows and points to, the second thing is his divine power. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor. He's been there 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe you sent me. When he'd said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Can you imagine that moment? What happens? Is there a heartbeat? Is there a moment of silence? The crowd standing there thinking, there's no way this is happening, is it? Surely he's gone one step too far here, and this is not how you behave at a funeral. But then the dead man walks right out of death. Imagine watching the scene, the thrill of hope that might rise in the heart of the crowd. Are the sad things really going to come untrue? And in this story, as John depicts it, we just get a little window into God's purpose in Jesus, in sending his Son to become human. That he isn't just sent to join us in our mess, but he's sent to undo the mess itself. All of those fractures that we have caused by turning away from our Creator, Jesus steps into them. He becomes human, not just so that he can suffer with us, but so that he can suffer for us. Because in just a few days after this account, Jesus is going to come to another grave. But he won't walk up to this one. He will be carried in. Having experienced a death which literally invented the word excruciating. Having taken on suffering that is all the result of us turning away from our Creator. And then a few days later, he will walk out of that grave, living a life that has defeated death itself. See, suffering, it shows that there's a problem. It makes us cry there is something wrong. And then the next question is, what is it? Jesus' answer is to say that suffering also points to a solution. The compassion of God become human and the power of the man who is God. Now, I don't know whether you are familiar with the story of Lazarus, or whether that may even been the first time you've ever really given it some thought. But we're going to pause again just now. We're going to put a couple of questions up on the screen again. Opportunity for you to discuss these questions if you'd like to. Again, equally, if you would like to just sit quietly, that's also fine. Or if you would simply like to share something of your own experience, having heard something from Michael, then that is also great. Here are the two questions. Suffering, I've said, doesn't need an explanation as much as it needs a solution. Do you agree? And secondly, how do you identify with Mary and Martha's experience? Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. We'll give you a few minutes, and then I'll be back in a moment. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry again to break into those conversations. There is going to be one more opportunity to pause and talk, and then the rest of your lives, once we've finished, to chat more about this too. I'm now going to ask, Joe has already joined me up on the stage, just to give us another opportunity to hear from someone on just how these things that we're talking about kind of hit the ground in someone's life. So this is Joe. Joe, tell us some of your stats.
Hello.
Tell us about yourself.
I'm an engineer. I'm a second-year engineer at Emma. I've been here, this is now my third year being in Cambridge, but I intermitted, so now I'm in my second year.
Okay, so you've alluded to it already. You intermitted for a time. University life hasn't been straightforward by any means for you.
No.
Tell us a little bit about that experience.
So in September 2021, I was camping with a bunch of friends from Cambridge. Some of you guys are here. And a bunch of us fell ill with a viral bug. And we all recovered, apart from me. I didn't recover. And I continued to have severe nausea for the days afterwards, complete and utter fatigue. I was wiped out. I didn't sleep for 2 days straight because I was so nauseous. And I was waiting for this to go away, and it never went away. And a week went past, and 2 weeks went past, and a month went past. And I was still stuck in bed often for 4 or 5 hours out of the day, so sick and force-feeding myself to get some nutrition in. I tried going back to Cambridge. I couldn't do any of my study. I couldn't focus. I was in bed for much of the day, so sick, and I didn't know what was happening to me. I went to the doctors. I had many medical tests done. I had cameras put down me. I had, swallowing tests, all sorts of different things, and all the tests came back negative. I went through the whole process of doctors trying to pad it off as like IBS or something, and I was just like, you don't understand what this is doing to me. I can barely eat. My weight is just dropping kilogram, and I'm terrified, and I can't think straight. I can't do my work. And over the Christmas of that year, I fell into a really deep and dark place mentally. As a result, I intermitted. I was at home. I couldn't get out of bed, and life was pretty hard at that point. I just remember one night going out for a walk, and it was dark, and I walked for about 10 minutes, and just this terror came upon me, and I just legged it home, and I just like, what is happening to me? What is going on with my life? I didn't realize that some of the medication I'd been given was causing this depressive episode, but I no longer had joy in anything I did. I was just in bed for so much of the day, sometimes ill, sometimes because I was depressed. And eventually, 9 months after it started, I went into hospital. They gave me radioactive eggs to eat, out of all things. I went and put on a gown, was given radioactive eggs to eat. They took some photos over 2 hours, and they were able to see that the food went into me and then stopped there and was not moving through. And they diagnosed me with a condition called gastroparesis, which literally means paralysis of the stomach. So they theorized that the virus had damaged the nerves which control my stomach, and therefore my stomach wasn't working anymore. And they were able to give me medication and things, but I'm still living with that condition today, and I still have multiple times, so I have to spend a number of hours in bed after I've eaten because my body can't process the food. So that's been my journey over the last 16 months or so.
So 9 months of not knowing what on earth was happening, real physical problems, but then also significant mental and emotional distress and problems as well. And then living for another, since those 9 months, for another 7 months or so since. We're thinking a lot about the questions around suffering and who God is this evening. And you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question, I guess, is what role does your faith in God have through the experiences that you've had, both now, but also as you look back over that period?
So when I would hope to have said I would have had quite a strong faith before this happened to me. And when I first got ill, I laid out all that I thought I knew about God and all the answers I've been given about suffering and so forth from people. And I just couldn't square it with what was going on in my life. I couldn't put the pieces together, and I got angry, and I was looking at God, and I was like, what are you doing? What is going on? And for a long time, I used that to bash God. I took that as a question. I said, look at my life, God. And I used that to almost against him, and I bashed him, and I used the question of why to justify that position against God. And around Christmas time, when I fell into sort of that deep depressive episode, what happened to me in church was the church service ended, and two people came up to me, a guy and a woman, and they both said to me that on that day they felt God had a word for me. They felt like God had told me something. The guy came up to me and said, I think God has told me what you're going through. And he knew, like, I had a stomach problem. This had been turned around. And he turned to me and he said, I think God has told me that you are going through depression, that you are going through fatigue, and you are going through anxiety. And I had only told those three things to my parents, and my parents had not told anyone else. But he had felt strongly to come to God and tell me. Those were the three things in my life at that time, which were the absolute hardest things. And so I was listening. I was just like, okay, I don't know what this is. I've never heard of like prophecy happening before, really. But I listened, and the woman said to me, I think I have a word from God for you. And she said to me, she read this Bible verse out. It's from Isaiah 43. I'm afraid it's not in the Bibles you have in front of you, but this is what she gave me. It says, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And she said to me, this was going to be a time where God was going to test me and train me for what was ahead, and that God was willing to heal me, that healing was coming, but this was a season where God was going to train me. And that turned me 180 degrees. And I went to God and I said to God, I'm going to stop bashing you with this question, and I'm going to ask you this question instead. I'm going to ask you, why is this happening? What is going on? And I'm going to listen to your answer. And God has answered that question, not in the full way of the whole question, but in my situation, he has answered that question for me. He's taken me through many events over this last year, which have made it clear to me, well, somewhat clear to me, where is God in the suffering? How does he reason through it in the Bible? There's a whole book in the Bible called Job, which reasons through a man which had the most horrific suffering, and his questions before God and God's answer to him. And what I understood, some of what I've understood, is that he has obviously allowed it to happen. I had to square that with him first. He's allowed this to happen, but I shouldn't be surprised by that. He has allowed it to happen to other people. But this is what he says. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And that is a promise to those who come to Christ, to those who know God, that he promises to be with us in our suffering. That's why Jesus comes as a person. That's why Jesus in the story sits with Mary and Martha as they're waiting for the tomb, and he weeps because he is with us. He is with us in our suffering. He is aware of our suffering. He himself has suffered the most horrific death. He knows what it's like, and he sits with us in that pain. And he has sat with me this last year, even though I haven't been healed yet. I'm still waiting for that to happen. But I've seen his goodness throughout all of this.
Thank you, Joe, so much for sharing your story. Again, a very brave thing to do. Of course, one of the things that humans have done for centuries is respond to suffering creatively as well, and artistically. And what we're going to have now is a piece of music which exhibits that. So we're going to hand over to the guys to do that.
Hi, I'm Daisy, and this is David. And we're going to be performing a song called Take Heart. This song was written by a woman called Liv Chapman, and she wrote the lyrics for her brother Sam. Now, Sam had a severe illness, and he lived in nearly constant pain for 12 years of his life. And Sam wanted a song that he could sing to express to God honestly how he was feeling in the midst of immense suffering. Liv described Sam, her brother, like this. He spent most of his life clinging to the feet of Jesus. You could tell in the way it flavored his conversation, his attitude, and his assurance that God was good and loving, even though his own life was continually so difficult. Although I'm sure many of us in this room here have not suffered in the same way as Sam, I'm fairly certain that everyone here would say that they, at some point in their life, have experienced some kind of pain or anguish or hopelessness. As a Christian, when I'm hurting, I try to fix my eyes upon Jesus, who's my hope, and I wait for his return, when he has promised that all of the wrong things of this world will be made right. And, as it says in the book of Revelation, right at the end of the Bible, he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. So this is Take Heart. The lyrics will be on the screen so you can reflect on them. And yeah, I hope this is useful for you. Broken one, take heart, for your King has entered in, made your heart his home, when he washed away your sin. In the darkest day, know your shame is all gone. When he looks at you, God will see his Son. At the throne of grace, he says, sinner, come. Hurting one, take heart, for your King will walk beside. With each rising sun, every grace he will provide. In the hardest day, he will never forsake, for he knows your grief and he feels your pain. When the world gives way, Jesus will remain. Waiting one, take heart, for your King will soon return, ending every strife. He will reign upon the earth. In the longest day, know the victory is won. Do not fear the world, he has overcome.
You are safe in him, covered by his love. Do not fear the world, he has overcome. You are safe in him, covered by his love.
Thank you so much, guys. As these guys clear the keyboard out of the way, we're coming towards the end of our time together for this evening now. And in many ways, just wanted to kind of give us a summary, really, of an opportunity just to think one more time about what we've been considering. In many ways, suffering is a question looking for an answer. It yells at us that there is a problem. And our whys cast around. We ask our questions why, and they cast around for what that problem might be, let alone how it might be fixed. Through the accounts of his life, Jesus' words and life and death and resurrection suggest that neat answers will not solve the problem. Suggests that the problem is not a heartless God, but the problem of the human heart. And suggests that his powerful compassion is the thing that will solve the problem. His powerful compassion that saw him suffer with us, suffer for us, undergo death itself, and burst right through the grave. Earlier on, I mentioned that I've been struggling recently with my own mental health. Actually, over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, I've been really struggling with that, and I've been having some counselling recently. My counsellor happens to be a Christian, someone who I'm able to share how I'm feeling with, talk through kind of some of the dark thoughts that have been creeping in. And one of the things that my counsellor has been regularly saying to me is something that counsellors I know are trained never to say. Matt, it won't always be like this. And the reason he can say that is because he knows Jesus rose. He knows that he suffered and that he died, and that he knows that his suffering and his death are proof that his new life is now death and suffering proof. So as we close, I want you to step back in the story for a minute. We've heard the story of Jesus and Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and I want us to ask, where in the story do we find ourselves? Many of us, I'm sure, are kind of sitting, thinking, I'm probably somewhere in the crowd, looking on, seeing the suffering of others and asking questions. Couldn't the one who could do all of these things, had stopped this man from dying, have stopped X, Y, or Z? Couldn't he stop? Does he not care? Some in this room right now, and all of us one day, will find ourselves in Mary and Martha's position, grieving and hurting. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But Jesus' promise and John's invitation is that we might trust this promise, is that one day all of us will hear our name called. Come out. And the sad things will come untrue because Jesus rose. This is so good. This is such good news. This is why the Christian Union exists. It's why the Christian Union is putting on events like this. Because the Christian Union, because I want to share how good this is. We long that you would look into this, that you would check Jesus out, that you might pick up John, take him away with you and read him over the next few days, few weeks, that you would examine what Jesus is like. What do you make of the claim that he died and rose again to end suffering? And that maybe even you might recognize who he is and entrust yourselves to him. Because he is the only one who can solve the problem that suffering points to, who can answer the question it raises. I'm very aware that this evening all sorts of things might have been stirred up. You may have a whole load of questions. You may simply just want to shout at me. That's fine. After we finish in a moment, I'm going to be sat down in this corner. And if you want to come and talk to me, I would love to chat with you. If you want to come and pray with me, I would love to do that. And a few others who are here helping out the CU will be there as well if you would like to chat with us. But this is the moment we can have one final opportunity to raise some questions, to talk a little bit about this. And so there's a couple more questions that are going to go up on the screen again. I'm going to give you another few minutes before Chris and Sarah come back to wrap everything up, just to help us perhaps just kind of process one or two final things. Here they are. Imagine that like Mary and Martha, you had Jesus standing in front of you. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. What would you want to say to him? What might you ask him? And if you're feeling brave, and if someone who you came with, who you know is a Christian, is feeling brave, why not ask them how knowing Jesus has made a difference to their experience of hard times? They're up on the screen. We'll give you a few minutes to chat over that, or indeed anything else that has come up this evening.
Hi, everyone. We just wanted to say thank you so much for coming. We hope you've learned a little bit more about the one we can hold on to when we're hurting.
And our conversations don't have to end tonight. Human will be continuing tomorrow and on Friday. Tomorrow we're going to be thinking about the theme Hopeful. Our lunchtime, international and evening events will be here, but the international event will be at Henry Martin Hall just next door. Further information you can find on leaflets, or someone in the Christian Union will happily tell you.
So yeah, please feel free to stay to chat. As Matt mentioned, he'll be over there with some others if you'd like to pray, chat with him, entrust your life to Jesus, who we've been talking about. The reason we're so passionate about it is because we think this is truth that you get to respond to. So if you want to respond in any way, we'd absolutely love that.
Another way you might like to respond is to keep reading. You might want to continue reading the Gospel of John on your tables, or head over to the bookstall at the back of the church. One book you might like to read is called Reality and Other Stories. It's co-written by Matt, and you can find out more about how our lives reflect the story of Mary and Martha.
And another way you could respond is through QR codes we have with response forms, and they could be, you could reply with anything like what snacks you want, more pick and mix, or if you want to read the Gospel of John with a member of the Christian Union, or just find out more about who this Jesus guy is. So they will be on the screens, and you can be able to scan them, and yeah, well, hopefully they'll be on the screens at some point. But we'd love to hear back from you and engage. The CU is also putting on a series of events called The Search. So for the next 4 Mondays at 7:30, exploring more about Jesus, truth, Gospels. So if you want to continue these conversations and you have more questions, that would be the place for you.
That's all from us for this evening. Thank you and good night.
So if you've enjoyed thinking about what it means to be human and thinking about who are we, I would love to invite you to keep exploring. And the way we're going to do this is for the next 4 weeks on Monday evenings, we are going to be coming together for The Search. What is The Search? It's going to be 10 minutes of a talk and then loads of discussion. So bring your questions that you couldn't get answered, bring your disagreements, your agreements, and we'll have a great chat and explore these things together. Let's head over there. So here we are, we're at the Johns Divinity School, and this is where The Search is going to be. There's going to be someone to let you in, warm welcome, some food, a 10-minute talk, and then loads of chat. We're going to be looking at who is Jesus, what's wrong with the world, why did he have to die, and did he really rise again? And I would love to see you there. So 7:30 on Monday. See you there.